The trip started the night before in Indiana, but the adventure began the following morning in Jackson, Mississippi. We had left Indiana late in the afternoon and driven straight through on our way to New Orleans. And we stopped in Jackson for breakfast. Most everybody in the group were from the Midwest. I was the only bona fide Southerner, having grown up in Alabama. We were a work group from Purdue University for spring break. 13 students, a couple of professors, and me, a campus minister. We sat at tables for 4 in the little restaurant, and the students at the table next to me got their order before I placed mine. And I heard one of the students say, "What's this white stuff on the plate?" Whatever it is, I didn't order it. And I said, "That's grits." And down here, everybody assumes that everybody eats grits. And you're going to get it unless you know how to talk right. And pretty soon the waitress showed up to take our order, and I reached up and put my arm around her waist and I said, "Ma'am, I grew up in this part of the country. I ate grits every morning. In fact, I was 21 years old before I found out the federal government didn't require you to eat grits every morning for breakfast. But I don't want any grits, okay?" And she said, "I got you." Took the order. Pretty soon the meal came, and sure enough, on my plate there was a serving of grits. And before I could say anything, the waitress said, "I heard all that stuff about the federal government, but let me tell you something. Ned's been cooking grits here, been cooking breakfast here for 34 years. Everybody gets grits. That's just the way it is." And that was the beginning of our adventure. Drove on into New Orleans to the Rampart Street Community Center. And that would be our home for the week. We had brought our sleeping bags so we could bed down in the center, and our work project, was to do some electrical wiring or rewiring and some painting and sprucing up of the center. Couldn't have asked for a more conscientious group. The students worked hard. The professors were electrical engineering professors. Some of the students were their students. And they worked hard, did a good job. And I had intended to take them to different entertainment experiences at night when we closed down, when we quit working. And the first experience was down in the French Quarter. And after work, and we'd had supper, and the food was fantastic. Mary, the community center cook, had prepared for us the first night we were there, had made jambalaya, her specialty, and it was delicious. It didn't look too good, if you know jambalaya, but it sure was good. So the first night, after we'd finished working, I decided to take the students down into the quarter. We walked a few blocks to Preservation Hall. Preservation Hall is was an old livery stable back in the old days, and not a lot had been done to clean it up. It was pretty dark and dingy and not terribly large. There wasn't enough seating for everybody, so some of us sat on the floor. I could tell from the looks that I was getting from the students that they were totally unimpressed. And I was trying to figure out what else I could do during the week. But we sat there and waited. Pretty soon, 2 old men came in carrying their cases, and one sat down and opened his up, took his trumpet out, fingered the valves a little bit, laid it back in the case, and the other one did the same with his clarinet. He played a little bit on it and set it down and waited. Then an older woman came in, nodded to the two men, walked over to the piano, sat down and ran her fingers along the keyboard, turned around on the stool, and the three of them started talking in low conversational tones. Then the drummer came in, also an older man, picked up his sticks, did a little drum roll, and sat back, and they all waited. After a while, Big Jim, the trombone man, came in. Big man ambled over to his chair, sat down, opened his case, took out the mouthpiece, blew in it a little bit, stuck it in the horn, and turned around and nodded to the others. The lady started on the piano, and on cue, everybody joined in. And I have to tell you that for the next 2.5 hours, that place was alive with some of the best premium Dixieland jazz you have ever heard in your life. I had intended to take the students to other places in New Orleans for their entertainment during the time that we were there, but they completely overruled me, and for every night following to the rest of the week that we were there, it was Preservation Hall. And somebody would get a gallon of Boone's Farm apple wine, and we'd sit on the floor, get as close to the musicians as we possibly could, pass around the wine, listen and clap and resonate with that Dixieland music. Music was our whole experience. As I mentioned, food was terribly important. Mary introduced us to shrimp creole, gumbo, red beans and rice, and of course our specialty, jambalaya. I had decided that because the students were working so hard that I would give them a special treat. And so I asked Mary where she got her oysters. And she told me. I went down and bought a sack of oysters and late in the afternoon started shucking them. And I had only one student, as I remember, who would even taste a raw oysters. I told you they were from the Midwest. And we shucked them. She would actually help me shuck the oysters. We shucked them and fried up some of them. And I think only 4 or 5 of the students would even eat them fried. It's okay by me because I had a bushel of oysters, and I shucked all of them, put them in gallon jugs, froze them, and I took them home for my own gourmet delights. We had learned as we got near the end of the week that there were parades beginning in the outlying neighborhoods. This was the week before Mardi Gras. And what happens is that the small neighborhood parades begin a week early, and then during the week of Mardi Gras, the big parades, of course, are downtown. And while the crews were putting their finishing touches on their parade floats for the big week, for the big days, we were packing up to go home. I found out that the spring break for the following year would coincide with Mardi Gras. And I took that as a sign or as an invitation to come back. And we did. But that's another story. I mentioned Big Jim by name specifically because we were the last people, some of the last people, to hear him play, a few weeks after we had left. One night after a full performance, and they ended with When the Saints Go Marching In, which is what they always did, Big Jim said, "You know, That last Saints just about did me in. And he sat down and died. Big Jim was 90 years old. Grits, jambalaya, shrimp Creole gumbo, Dixieland jazz, apple wine, hard work, fixing up a community center. That may not sound like much to you, but I have to tell you, I heard from the students stories about that week for years later. And I've told them even longer.